Wagwan. Good morning, good night, welcome back. And if you're listening for the first time, welcome to episode 15 of The Real Situation, where we give you a taste of Jamaican politics. I'm your host, Melanie Byfield, and in this series, we're focusing on Jamaica's journey to becoming a republic. A small recap for those joining for the first time. After 62 years, independent Jamaica is on the road to transitioning from a constitutional monarchy to a constitutional republic. Why? Because the head of state and highest representative of Jamaica is an English king. The 1962 Constitution, which granted Jamaica independence and which represents the highest law of the land, is a colonial document. And Jamaica's highest court of appeal is the Privy Council in London. That good for you? Not for all you Jamaicans either. So there's your answer to the question why. This is the first of 3 phases of constitutional reform, and right now we are in phase 1, focusing on changes to fully entrenched provisions of the Constitution. That is to remove the monarchy, King Charles III as head of state, and transition from a constitutional monarchy to a constitutional republic. It will also involve amending the colonial instrument known as the Second Schedule of the Jamaica Constitution Order in Council 1962, and Jamaicanizing it into a constitution by the people, of the people, and for the people, becoming the Constitution of Jamaica. Because the proposed changes are fully entrenched, there also needs to be a referendum held for the people of Jamaica who are eligible to vote to say yes or no to the proposed amendments. Just to give you an idea about some referendums, so in Eritrea, in 1993, there was a referendum as to whether they should become sovereign and independent from Ethiopia. This was after about 30 years of war. And 99.8% of the voters said yes. 2016, in the United Kingdom, there was a referendum for Britain to leave, for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union after 41 years. There was a 72.21% turnout, which resulted in them leaving the EU by 52% for, 48% against. And in the United States, there actually isn't a referendum at the federal level, but at the state and local levels, they have what's called a ballot or a proposition or a question that will appear when there's an election. So, back to our update. The Constitutional Reform Committee submitted a May 2024 report of recommendations that was tabled in Parliament as a ministry paper. But Mark Golding, the leader of the opposition, had issues. He prepared a document outlining the issues that the PNP disagreed with, the biggest one relating to the final Court of Appeal. The argument being that Jamaica won't be fully independent while retaining the Privy Council as a colonial final court of appeal. The Caribbean Court of Justice has been suggested as the replacement for the Privy Council, especially since Jamaica is a member of CARICOM, was instrumental in establishing the court, and invested financially in its creation. So what's been going on this week? Why? One way to describe Jamaican politics right now is hot, hot, hot. But as you know, the focus here is on Jamaica's journey to becoming a republic. But the one thing that is not only important to party politics and Jamaica becoming a republic is the ability to vote. Like President Obama says, don't boo, vote. I actually do want to take the time to big up the protest that took place yesterday. That was Sunday, November 25. The protest was over public access to the Blue Lagoon in Port Antonio. The Beach Control Act of 1956 was one of many laws that remained in place when Jamaica became independent in 1962. And it doesn't give the people of Jamaica the right to beach and river access. JABEM, Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement, is an environmental movement that fights through court action to protect that access. Excuse me. And the protest was televised, courtesy of Andre Stevens on PD TV. Andre? Little diversion there, but yeah, I just wanted to big up that protest. Hopefully this podcast is providing information that, back to voting, that enables those who are eligible to vote in a referendum to do so not for green or orange, but because you understand the issues being raised, right? And you're voting based on what you believe the new Jamaica, the new republic, and its constitution should look like. Right now, there's no hint of when a referendum for Jamaica becoming a republic will be announced. But for the general election, the government is constitutionally required to call it by September 2025. If you're eligible to vote, but you're not registered to vote, September 30 was the deadline for the voters list that's scheduled to be published on November 30. March 31, 2025 is the next deadline to register for the voters list that's going to be published on May 31, 2025. In order to effect changes to the Constitution, there's a 2/3 majority of both houses that's needed. So the Jamaican Constitution effectively requires consensus, right, amongst the government and opposition senators. Right now, the government has the 2/3 majority in the House, but doesn't have the 2/3 majority in the Senate. Section 7 of the CRC's report addresses the composition of the Senate. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And about who Jamaica's senators are and what they do. So, what is the Senate? It's that there are two houses in the Parliament. The Senate is the upper house. There are 21 senators, and they are appointed by the Governor-General, 13 on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, and 8 on the recommendation of the Leader of the Opposition. The Senate is presided over by a President, and in his or her absence, a Deputy President. The Senate usually functions as a review chamber, considering bills passed by the House of Representatives. They can initiate legislation even, other than money bills. It can't delay money bills for more than a month, nor any other bill for more than 7 months. The Senate is governed by rules called standing orders. I'm going to read a little bit from an article called Tedious but Important Work from the Jamaica Observer, January 11, 2024. Where the Senate President Tom Tavares Finson talks about how the Standing Orders Committee have been conducting a line-by-line reviews of the standing orders. And basically bring in how that upper house conducts its business into the modern day, right? How a modern day parliament is expected to operate. The one thing, I mean, there's been a couple of amendments along the way. One of the things that they did do in the Senate is enable sit-ins to occur virtually, and this started in COVID. But if you are attending a meeting virtually, you can't contribute to a quorum, which I believe is 8, and you can't vote. So who are Jamaica's senators? And I should point out that 4 of them are entitled, no more than 4, to be cabinet ministers, right? So we'll point out who they are as we go through. So as we were saying before, the Jamaica Labour Party, the government can appoint 13 senators, right? So those are Thomas Tavares Finson, he's the president. Auburn Hill, he's Minister of Industry, Investment and Commerce, so that's one of those cabinet ministers. The second cabinet minister is Kamina Johnson-Smith. She is leader of government business and also Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. The third cabinet minister is Matthew Samuda. He's minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, with responsibility for water, environment and climate change. And that fourth cabinet minister is Dana Morris-Dixon, the newly appointed Minister of Education, Youth and Information. As you'll remember, Nigel gone. So Favour Williams is now the Finance Minister and Dana Morris-Dixon is now the new Minister of Education. The next senator, Abka Fitzhenley, he is Parliamentary Secretary. We have Ransford Braham, Cavan Gale, Sapphire Longmore, Shireen Golding Campbell, that's the daughter of the former Prime Minister Bruce Golding. Charles Sinclair, he's the Deputy President. Donald Waby, who actually recently resigned due to health reasons, so that creates a vacancy right there. And finally, Delroy Williams. The PNP senators are, or the opposition senators I should say, are Peter Bunting, he's the leader of opposition business and the opposition spokesperson on national security. Donna Scott Motley, deputy leader of the opposition business in the Senate and opposition spokesperson on justice and information. Floyd Emerson Morris, he's opposition spokesperson on housing and sustainable living. Damien What Can Go So Crawford, he's the opposition spokesperson on education, training and competitiveness. Gabriella Morris, she is opposition spokesperson on youth and entertainment and Jamaica's youngest senator. Sophia Fraser Binns, she is opposition spokesperson on land, environment and climate change. Lambert Alexander Brown, opposition spokesperson on information without portfolio, and Janice Allen, who is the opposition spokesperson on tourism and linkages. So, June 20th, 2023, a job description was released for members of Parliament. But what does a senator do? There's an article in the Jamaica Observer that was ran on May 24 of this year. It's called it's entitled, Is the Senate Fulfilling Its Best Purpose? I'm going to read you a little bit from this article. So it says, from time to time, the question comes up as to whether the Jamaican Senate is fulfilling its best purpose in a modern democracy. The reason is the article basically says that the Jamaican Senate copied the British bicameral legislative system, right, of two houses. Great Britain had a reason for its parliament to have two chambers. It developed because when the ruling class conceded adult suffrage, depriving itself of the control of the House of Commons by the votes of wealthy male property owners, it retained the right of review by having the upper chamber the House of Lords, and the very names explain the respective roles, the Commons and the Lords. In the United States of America, the Senate is there to ensure that the legislature is not dominated by the states with the largest population and therefore the largest number of congressional representatives. This rebalancing is accomplished by giving each state two senators. In Jamaica, the Senate has no role in class politics such as Britain or the balancing of the difference in size of states as in the USA. The Jamaican Senate has no indispensable role in governance and has no mandate because it's not directly elected by the people. There are two choices. Either it should be abolished or it should be reformed to allow it to perform some useful purpose. This is still the article that I'm reading from now, right? One suggestion is that each party could appoint 5 senators and agree on 3 independent senators, bringing you to the 13. Senate seats could be determined by popular vote on the basis of proportional representation. This has 2 advantages. First, a government with the most seats but a minority of the popular vote would be kept in check. And second, minority parties with a sufficient share of the popular vote but no seat in the House would have a voice on behalf of those who voted for them. Senators could be elected as in the USA. In Jamaica's case, we could have 1 elected senator for each parish, except St. Andrew would have 2 senators. This arrangement would then give us 15 senators, hence no possibility of deadlock. So that last part I'm gonna question, because when I count, there's 14 parishes identifying Kingston and St. Andrew separate, right? Kingston, St. Andrew, Portland, St. Thomas, St. Catherine, St. Mary, St. Anne, Manchester, Clarendon, Hanover, Westmoreland, St. James, Trelawney, St. Elizabeth. That's 14 parishes, right? So on that basis, yeah, you could have 14 senators. You could conceivably have the 15 because you could have 1 who represents the 3 million Jamaicans in the diaspora, right? And the proposal, as we're going to see by the CRC to increase the number, might well be, there might well be more of an argument to reduce it. So what about additional duties for senators? I mean, should senators conduct confirmation hearings? The Prime Minister appoints their cabinet, but should the Senate approve that selection? Who scrutinises their qualifications and background? In the US, just recently, Matt Gaetz, Republican nominee for Attorney General, I forgot sit down, come accuse a fast with one little picnic, and 5 senators from Fame Party skin up them face and say, hell no, bro. Let's take another angle to this subject and talk about independent senators, right? Someone who isn't from either of the major political parties. There's an article dated September 9, 2022 that was in the Gleaner, and it's called Orain Urges Wholeness Government to Appoint Independent Senators. Basically what this article is saying is that 70% of Jamaicans actually support the inclusion of independent senators. In 1997, when Prime Minister P.J. Patterson was returned to government, and I'm reading from this article now, by an overwhelming majority, he appointed Douglas O'Raine and Trevor Monroe as 2 independent senators, along with 11 government senators. O'Raine further highlighted that Jamaica was one of the few English-speaking Caribbean countries in which the inclusion of independent senators wasn't entrenched in law. He pointed to both Barbados and Trinidad, where it's required by law to have more independent senators than opposition senators. So we have to ask ourselves, why were their constitutions constructed in that way? And clearly it was to bring a level of balance to the deliberations of the Senate, which is there to ensure that good laws are passed in the interest of all the society and not necessarily for political, partisan reasons. There's a situation that can and has arisen where there's no opposition. Between 1983 and 1989, after the PNP boycotted the 83 elections, the Governor-General, yes, it happened then, so the Governor-General can appoint the senators, preventing the lower house from being completely dominated by one party. And he can appoint those senators even if the approval of the opposition isn't given. So let's take a look at what the CRC is proposing under Section 7, Composition of the Senate. Let's look at Section 7.1, Increase of Membership. The CRC recommends that the size of the Senate be increased from its present membership of 21 to 27. Remember, in the 21 is 13 and 8, right? They would now like to propose 15 members for the government from the Prime Minister, 9 members from the opposition, and then 3 members at the President's discretion from among outstanding persons in the private sector, civil society, faith-based or community-based organizations, or other sectors of society as the President considers necessary. I note the absence of the diaspora in there. Yeah. So, we have 63 MPs. Do we really need more senators? I am going to wrap this up by reading you an article, parts of an article that was in the Jamaica Gleaner by a gentleman called Garth Rattray, and it's called What Happened to Greenwich Town. This article's dated October 27, 2024. Garth Rattray says, we had running water and electricity, but the washing was done outside in a cistern. There were many tenement yards within the community. However, crime was exceedingly rare, and so were interpersonal conflicts. The village raising a child thing was very active at that time, even up to and including the early 70s. Children were corrected, scolded, and reported on by anybody. Likewise, they were watched over by hawks and protected by everybody. We all knew one another, and we all looked out for and took care of one another. Some families had better amenities than others, and some were more financially secure than others, but the community was poor. At that time, the consequences of poverty weren't devastating. Communities like Greenwich Town had a way of supporting the less fortunate and allowing them to keep pace with others around them. The children and youths aspired to become civil servants, which included government staff and teachers, top tradesmen, members of the security forces, part of the legal, medical or engineering profession, office workers, and perhaps working within the music industry. Now, despite the police presence, Greenwich Town is mired in violence, contract killings, and fear. It's become a haven for gun-toting youths, bad men and scammers. Killings have occurred while the police actively investigate murder meters away. Greenwich Town is now a sad reality. What happened to Greenwich Town? Our politicians failed it. A Senate appointment and the election of an MP is for the life of the Parliament, right? 5 years. The government represents the people of Jamaica, and the expectation is that for those 5 years, every day is work. A job description was introduced for members of Parliament of Jamaica in June 2023. There's none for a senator. Since the CRC's report is only a recommendation, maybe it's time to make some additions and to reassess exactly what that work should be. I hope you're continuing to enjoy this journey, finding it educational and useful, Anting, and looking forward to our continued travels on the road of Jamaica becoming a republic, truly independent and sovereign together. As I said before, right now in this process, Jamaica coming like a Porsche on a road full of potholes. Yes, the Porsche broke down. It now move, but I'm still confident that it's going to get fixed. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Podcast Indexed, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you want to reason about anything or you can't find any of the material I was talking about, you can email me on atasteofja@outlook.com. So until the next time, thank you for supporting this podcast. Please share it with your friends and family. And again, I thank you for taking the time to listen. One love.